I'm going to have you mute them. So we are live, and I'm going to get us all set up, you all, on our page. Um, if you are watching this on your phone device or a tablet, I'm going to ask that you turn the sound down on your phone so that it doesn't interfere with the sound from the live that we are currently in. So my name is Toni Mcneil. I'm the founder and the facilitator of Anti-Black Conversations. And I'm super stoked and excited today because I am standing in solidarity with my brothers and sisters from the, is it API, AAPI? I want to say Asian community, and we'll hash all that out as we go. And so I wanted to, first of all, thank you all for joining me in this space. We are going to really dive deep today in some real dialogue surrounding racism, hate crimes, and just some of the tension that is taking place with the Asian community. And it is not something that is unfamiliar to the Black community. I think that we all, as siblings in solidarity, experience these things in a unique way. But in order for us to be able to actually I don't know, even make changes, we've got to actually start having real dialogue and conversation. So I want to allow us to introduce ourselves while I get some technical things set up. And so, Elizabeth, if you can take us through, just allow everyone to introduce themselves.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Ng Mayberry. I'll introduce myself first, and then we'll just go around. We'll share our name, where we're at right now, where we're from, and why we're here. Maybe a little bit just about that. So I'm Elizabeth. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am currently in Stockton, Stockton, California. I grew up in Southern California in the suburbs, Chino Hills. I went to high school in Fullerton. Then I came up to the Bay Area, to Berkeley for college, moved back to LA, worked in downtown LA for a few years, worked in Claremont. I've been all over California, got married, went to New York, upstate New York for a couple years. And then I landed in Stockton in 2010. 2010, yep. And I've had a couple kids since then. I am the daughter of three kids. I'm the daughter of a ethnically Chinese political refugee from Indonesia. He came to the United States in 1960, before the Immigration Act of 1965. There's a whole story there, which I have not tapped into fully. I'm also the daughter of a Midwestern white Indiana farmer's daughter, and there's a whole story there as well. I identify as Asian American, and there's a whole story there. I'm mixed race. I am in this space because of a deep, trusting love and friendship with Toni that has developed over the last several years. And because we are who we are. And so this is sort of an organic birthing, if you will, of that relationship. Donald, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I can do that. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Donald Donaire. I use they, them pronouns. I am 28 years old. I am also a community organizer and educator here in Stockton. I also want to do a land acknowledgement. I'm on the land of Plains Miwok and Delta Yokuts peoples. I also left Stockton in 2011 to study in UC San Diego. And I ended up studying ethnic studies, and then I came back here to Stockton in 2018 to do youth education and civic engagement. And then I can pass the mic to Diane.
Greetings, everybody. Diane Ujia, activist minister, third generation Japanese American, born and raised in LA, which is Tongva land. My parents were both incarcerated during World War II. I'm a single mom, and I'm here because I want to elevate stories and narratives of unity and solidarity, and offset being pitted against each other under the under the dangerous umbrella of white supremacy. And I'll pass it to Sister Sandra.
Hi, thank you. My name is Sandra Chan, and I am also in Stockton, California. I am not from Stockton originally. I was born and raised in Southern California in Orange County. I am ethnically and 100% Korean. My grandfather came over to the United States from Korea with a Japanese passport during the Japanese occupation in 1905. And my mother came from South Korea when she was about 19. And so that is a little bit of my history. Let's see, I came to Stockton by way of my husband, who was born in Hong Kong, but came to California when he was almost 6, and his family settled in Stockton. His dad, who is still with us, thank the Lord, was the pastor at a local Chinese church in town here in Stockton, now retired. Let's see. So I came here after we were married in 2005. So I've been here for almost 16 years. We have two sons, the middle schoolers, and I am here because my relationship with Elizabeth, she invited me, and I am a little bit nervous to be in this space and a little bit scared, if I'm being honest. But I know that it's important to share our stories and to stand in true solidarity with our other Black and Brown brothers and sisters. And so, yeah, that is why I'm here. That's why I'm doing that. I'm raising my children to be proud of their heritage, and I'm raising my children to stand up for justice. So if I'm doing that, I have to do that as well.
Thank you, Sandra. I had to mute myself. I'm sorry for that. Like I said before, my name is Toni Mcneil. I am a native born and raised here in Stockton, California. My mother's from the Vallejo, California, and most of her family is from Vallejo, California. They migrated from the Deep South during the Great Migration and landed in the Bay Area. But Vallejo is where most of my mother's side of the family is. My father is an only child. I do not know who my grandfather's family is at all, and I don't know that the name that my father has. I believe that it was a name that was taken on for safety in order for them to be able to move forward. So his mother was a Black woman. His father was a white man. They were sharecroppers. And his mother was raped by the property owner, and he had no place of belonging. And so there is that sense of not belonging that I carry because I don't know, who my father's family is. And I don't know who my grandmother, on my father's side, I don't know, I have no knowledge of their family and their roots. And so that leaves that sense of, not knowing. And I kind of rebel sometimes against the ancestral issue that was taking place. So I just wanted to bring that into the space. So when I come into this space, I'm bringing my grandfather, Ollie Mcneil. I'm bringing my grandmother, Ruth Mcneil. I'm bringing my grandmother, Carrie, my great grandmother, Carrie Lou Outlaw, and my grandma, Jeanette. Smith, and my grandfather, they called him Tiny, but August Claiborne. I'm an Alberta Petty. So I'm bringing all of them into this space, and I need that. And I'm finding that I need that in a very strong way. So there's a lot of history and a lot of rich history, even on this panel. What I want to do before we dive into conversation is, Diane, I would like to turn it over to you and just have you, help us to get ourselves centered before we go forward.
Thank you, sister. And if we could just pause to give thanks for Toni, that she had the heart and the calling to convene, to create space, just a word of gratitude. Yeah, for real. So I invite you to get centered, to sit comfortably or to stand. Make sure both feet are planted on the ground. When we take a deep breath, we'll take a deep breath all the way through our diaphragm. And when we exhale, we'll exhale all the toxins. And we'll take 3 deep guided breaths at your pace. So the first deep breath is just to acknowledge yourself. So deep breath in. Notice your heartbeat. Notice your breathing. Notice your face, hands, feet. The second deep breath is to acknowledge how we are connected to each other. So second deep breath in. And the third deep breath is to acknowledge how we are connected to the universe and that we are on stolen land. So just paying tribute and honoring that. So third, slow, deep breath in. Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah. What I also want to do, thank you for that, Diane. I really appreciate that. What I also want to do is I want you to find something in your now, something that you can anchor yourself in your right now. So I'm going to center myself in Isa Nabi Dumbia. He is my grandson, and he is presently here in the house, and he brings me great joy. And I'm going to anchor myself in my family and my grandchildren, because we're about to dive into deep conversation that will tap into trauma and pain. And I want to make sure that we have a solid anchor that we can hold and pull to bring us back. So I want to make sure that you all make sure that you have it. So do you have that? Do you see it? Okay. And we've got our tissue. We've got all, we have all of what we need. I'm going to go and grab mine. Sandra, why we're here today. So we're going to get into a conversation, and we're going to talk about why we're here today. In order to even get started, can you share with us some of the stories, some of the reports, some things that are taking place around us? Is there a way that you could highlight that for us? Come off mute.
Yes, there is. So there is an organization called StopAAPIHate.org. And since March, they have been, they set up a way to receive reports of anti-Asian American incidents, whether it be verbal or physical etc. They recently came out, February 9th, they came out with a press release, and they highlight in some of, and at the end of the press release, some incidents. And I just wanted to read you some excerpts. They're all going to be from California. So a 67, and this is all with regards to our Asian American elders. So in Oakland, California, a 68-year-old, this is what he writes, or she, I'm not sure. I was waiting to enter a pharmacy to get my prescription when a group of construction workers, not social distancing, made fun of me by mocking me, fake coughing, spitting at me, and making slant-eyed gestures until I asked them to stop. No one else called these people out. That was in Oakland, California. In San Francisco, another story, 67-year-old. I was standing in an aisle at a hardware store when suddenly I was struck from behind. A video surveillance verified the incident in which a white male used his bent elbow to strike my upper back. Subsequent verbal attacks occurred with, quote, "Shut up, you monkey. F you, Chinaman. Go back to China. Stop bringing that Chinese virus over here." That was in San Francisco. In Alamo, California, as a 67-year-old, as I was leaving a restaurant, a white male stormed up to me, verbally harassed and terrorized me. He screamed, "Return to China, you effing Asian," and other hateful racial slurs, threatening me physically. This went on for several minutes as I departed the scene quickly to call the police, a clear case of racial hatred towards me. I called the police, who arrived quickly to apprehend him, gave a verbal account to another officer who arrived later. I have not heard back from anyone. This one, on my daily walk in my hometown of Sausalito, 71-year-old. I was wearing a face mask when a white woman yelled at me, "I hate Chinese people. Why do they come to this country?" When she passed me, I was stunned by her words, which caused me to fear and be more alert of my surroundings. So this is just some of the reports by our Asian American elders, all within California. And more recently, at the end of January, we have heard on the news and seen on the news video of our Asian American elders in Oakland and the Bay Area being physically assaulted, pushed down, resulting in injury and death. Yeah, that is what's been happening since March. I mean, this has been an issue for a while, but there's been, let's face it, an uptick, an increase since March of last year of anti-Asian sentiment.
So this is a hard conversation. This is a hard conversation to have. Anything that has to do with hate and hate crime is difficult to have. When you were reading this, what I thought about is what brought me here today. What got my attention? Elizabeth. Elizabeth got my attention. Elizabeth Ng Mayberry. So I call Elizabeth my bosom buddy. Like, Anne of Green Gables bosom buddy. Because we are truly kindred spirits. We're very similar in our heart work that we do. Elizabeth was sharing posts, and she's been sharing posts for the better part of a year, sporadically, here and there. Nothing like, nothing too much. I've seen them, but I never stopped to see them. Being fully transparent. I've seen them, and I never stopped to see her in them. So I only had a sort of awareness, and the busyness of doing the work, Black Lives Matter, all of that. Elizabeth would show up for me. She will fight viciously for me. She will advocate for me. And when I say me, I don't mean just Tony. She shows up for our concrete team. She shows up for those who are formerly incarcerated. Elizabeth made a choice to actually step outside of a faith space that did not leave room for her to advocate for Black and Brown community members that that are suffering due to white supremacy and racism and systemic oppression. She has shown up in spaces and made herself almost invisible. And I've had to fight with her to come present and be visible because she didn't want to take up too much space. And maybe about a month ago, she put up a post. Well, I'll be very honest, probably about 3 weeks ago, huh, Elizabeth? She put up a post and I seen it again. I looked at it, but this time I seen her and I felt her heart and I felt ashamed. I felt ashamed. I felt convicted because this woman will go to bat for me, and I have not been fully present for her. So that's why we're here today in regard to me, because I want to make as much noise as she makes for me in this. And so I want to ask, I want to toss it to you, Elizabeth, first. And I want to just, who are you holding in this space with you? And why is it so difficult for you to give voice for this?
I'm feeling a lot of tension in my neck and my shoulders. I bring my dad, my 80-year-old Chinese father, my family, my children who are white presenting. I bring my nieces and nephews who are Asian presenting, Chinese presenting. I bring my progressive Asian American siblings. I bring my more conservative family members, loved ones, Asian and non-Asian. I bring the concrete, who has adopted me and loved me so much in the last year or two. I struggle with seeing everyone and everything, and wanting to help, but not wanting to get in the way, and wanting to support, but also realizing that I, have felt very unseen and unheard and unsure of my place as an Asian American, as a mixed race person. Where do I fit in this? And I think that the thing that gives me hope is ironically just the struggle in this conversation, because I realize that there is more. There's more to be had. There's more for me and who I am, and what I bring. And there's more for every one of us who's here, everyone who's listening, and that we don't have to settle for what has been given to us as like, no, this is what it is. There's white supremacy, and there's the Black struggle, and then there's whiteness, and that's it. But there's so much more. And when we are courageous enough to look at it and to just get in the messiness of it, I really feel like you know, a greater liberation will come from that, and in acknowledging that. And I've learned that in my relationship with Tony is just like, let's not gloss over. Let's not just notice that our dear loved one is posting these things or, you know, makes these comments. Like, let's stop. Just stop and listen and let's uncover what's really going on here. So.
So when you hear that, Diane, for you, because you've been doing this for a long time, you know, when you hear that, what does that bring for you? You know, where are you at with this? And I want to talk to Diane, my friend and my sister, and not the advocate that always makes herself less for me. I want to see you.
During the 1992 riots, my father was attacked by 3 Black men. They threw rocks at him while he was driving home from work. My dad is a very gentle man. I lived in the Crenshaw district of LA, which is in South Central, as fires were going off, and I worked in a drug treatment program on Crenshaw, and we were on top of the roof with water hoses trying to protect our 30-bed drug treatment residential program, unaware that my dad was bleeding for looking like the enemy. And I've pushed that down because in solidarity, I understood the rage. I do. I really do. And I understand the manifestations and the symptoms of lack of education, lack of knowing each other's history, the lack of, or the actual manipulation of being pitted against each other economically, sociologically, politically. So I've held this tension of that grief. And my father didn't want vengeance or retaliation. And I don't think that I've fully grieved his injury, because the drug treatment program where I worked was Asian, but it was also very Black and very Latino. And so I just needed to continue to do the work. So one of the ways I make sense of stuff, and I have a different short poem. It's really short. Is it okay if I do that?
Yes, absolutely, please.
I'm not a linear thinker. I'm not an academic. I'm not logical. It's called shikataganai, which in Japanese means it must be so. Well, that's the way I'm interpreting it. And once again, I need to thank Tony for creating this space, because also, as she knows, many of us are functioning on top of it. We have our jobs, we have our families, we've got to do laundry, right? So we're functioning on top of it. And so I am gonna cry. I didn't even put eye makeup on because I knew that it was gonna become a hot mess. And I cuss, so I apologize.
I need Diane, just Diane. Do you? Right. No apologies, unapologetic, authentically you and who you are.
And I am very angry. I just have to say this, at the Asian American Church, because I think they have added to the patriotic, nationalistic, idol worship. But then on the one hand, I'm angry, but on the other hand, I understand it because we had to conform. So there's always this tension of understanding how we have to conform to Americanism, which is usually blue-eyed, blonde-haired bullshit. So here's my poem. It's not that long. World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, covert war in Cambodia. I am not the enemy. Yellow is color of sunlight, lemons, golden, honey, smoldering. Yellow is sun and moon. Yellow is hella, better in context, not pretext. Yellow is brown. Brown is black. Yellow is straight, straight and narrow. Chinese, Japanese, dirty knees, look at these. Korean, Hmong, Laotian, Cambodian, Burmese, Thai, flip, egg rolls and tea. Model minority? Foreigner, go home. No foreigners allowed. Whose side are you on? When blue eyes adopt us, brown eyes suspect us. Ching, chong, Chinaman, gook, slope, nip, chink, Jap. On railroads, in camps, on farms, brown arms doing laundry, making maps, paving the way for big American dream. Gold Mountain, yellow fever, chop chop with the cleaver. Plant one foot, plant the other. Now let's be clear. We are here like you and you and you. Lemon, yellow, golden heli, golden honey, shikataganai. It must be so. So I think the dilemma for me has been the perpetual foreigner, my lightness of skin, my straightness of hair. Where do we lean into being in solidarity, or do we try to acculturate into like white hegemony? And during the riots, the 92 riots, I really struggled with looking like this and navigating Crenshaw and Slauson and Manchester and Florence and Normandy Avenue, where I live now. So I'll keep it open right there. And then I know at some point, maybe we'll touch on when we've had moments of solidarity, deep solidarity, but we'll see how the conversation flows, because I know we want to hear from our brother also. And thank you for letting me read that.
So thank you for that. That was very powerful. Every time I see the color yellow or the sun, I'm going to also think about my siblings. So live free. So yeah, because I feel like white supremacy and whiteness is almost stripping the power of color. It makes it seem like it's not pure, it's not clean, it's not beautiful. Yeah. So, Sandra, I see you come off mute, so I'm gonna no.
I simply wanted to say thank you, Diane, for that poem. Powerful. Thank you.
So, Diana, Sandra, I'm gonna pull you back in. I know that you said that this was a place I know in our check-in even before you had to pray, and we prayed for you. I am going to cry, and let me just tell y'all, I am just going to cry. But we prayed for you and prayed for your courage in order to be here. With Black Lives Matter, there is a lot of anger, and that anger helps give us power, because it's just been pushed down and we've been oppressed for so long. Culturally, that is not the same posturing that my siblings that I currently sit with, that I have experienced. And so there is, and it's not passive and aggressive. It is just, there is cultural differences that are here. Sandra, I prayed for God to give you courage and holy boldness to come into this space, because you advocate for communities of color, you advocate for communities where it's predominantly white, you sit in places for education, you do all of these different things. There is no denying that you are a woman of color. However, I was praying that God give you courage to be your authentic self in this space and not have to hide behind your job, your position. So who are you bringing into this space?
You're making me cry. I bring my children. Like I said, I want them to have it so much better than we have and do. I bring my mom. who came over as an immigrant, and made a new life here. I bring my dad's family, who grew up. My dad was an older dad. He was born in 1916, and he was in World War II in the Army. And he grew up in Oregon and Idaho in a time when it was very different. And the things that his family experienced in that space, and what they had to stand up for and just try to make a life in Oregon and Idaho as an ethnic minority. I bring from my dad's side many, in addition to my dad, other relatives who were in World War II, and had a cousin who was a fighter pilot in World War II, decorated, and the experience, his experiences of racism in that context. I have an uncle who was a bombardier who was shot down and died in Italy. I bring all of that. They were truly Americans, but they were perceived as other, and I am perceived as other, not truly 100% American. So I bring all of that with me.
And can I ask you, how much of who you are culturally, how much of your history, how much do you keep underneath masks?
When you're, I think, and I think you probably all have this experience as well. Depending on the situation where you find yourself, you code switch, right? So it is a constant unconscious filtering of what you're going to say, what you can say, what is safe to say, what is appropriate, how will they perceive, what can I be in this space. So it's fluid. It is fluid. So it all depends. And I fully respect that people are in different places in their ethnic journey. I fully respect and respect that. And I am not trying to force anybody. I don't think anybody gets anywhere by being shamed or humiliated. But again, part of the reason I'm in this conversation is because it is important to tell your story. Nobody can dispute my story. It is my story. So you can, unless you call me a liar, nobody can dispute. This is my experience. These are my stories. So.
Thank you. And I'm going to say it a lot. Thank you. And thank you for being so courageous. Thank you for showing up in this space, Sandra. I really, really appreciate you showing up in this space, Sandra. And I told you before, I'm going to tell you again because I feel led to. You are absolutely stunningly beautiful person. You are a beautiful soul. You are beautiful inside and out. And I just really wanted to make sure I said that too again to affirm you. You are amazing and beautiful inside and out. Donald, Ah, now you see me in all these different spaces, and once again, it's like I'm moving so quickly, and I don't stop. And so today I get to stop and I get to meet you. And so you, who are you? Who are you bringing into space with you today?
Hello, everyone. Thank you again, Tony, and to Elizabeth for inviting me to this space. Again, my name is Donaire. I use they, them pronouns. I forgot to introduce my ethnicity earlier, but I'm Filipinx, or Filipino American. I'm second generation, so my parents had moved here from the Philippines. Specifically, I'm Ilocano and Visayan. And so for today, I'm thinking about, folks who have passed away, specifically Dr. Don Mabalon, who's been such a big part and reason why I'm back here in Stockton organizing with youth and community. I'm also thinking about, our collective ancestors like Yuri Kochiyama and Grace Lee Boggs. I look to them as, a North Star as Asian Americans in history who have helped with the Black Civil Rights Movement and Liberation Movement. So those are the folks that I'm thinking about who I owe a lot to in terms of why I do what I do, where I do.
So is it more, so I appreciate the generational lens from here because we're hitting almost all generations in this space. I think you might be a millennial and not a Gen Z, Donald. And so we don't have a Gen Z here, but we've got all our other generations. So is it different from where you're postured at, Donald, what's going on right now? Because we're getting a lot of reports, the abuse that is going on. So I'm gonna call it out, elderly abuse. There's a lot of elderly abuse that is going on, which is to me the most vulnerable of populations. So it is the most disgusting, the most heinous, the most inexcusable, inappropriate, and shameful. Cowardice. I'm naming all that. So because I can't imagine elderly being able to actually even defend themselves or fight back. It is a displacing of anger, frustration, and fear that is being projected onto a demographic, a culture, and a population of individuals that can't even fight back and are not responsible. So it's ignorant. It's all of that. So now that I've said all of that, and it's probably not all going to come out of my system, but I'm going to try to get it out as much as I can. For you as the younger in this space, is there a different posturing or approach? Because where Sandra is more, seems more like, passive, quiet, and just demure in regard to it. Donald on the other side, is there like a let's rock, let's fight, does that ever come up for y'all?
You mean for young people?
Yes.
Oh, definitely. I'll share a story. Like this is where the context I'm coming from. I went to school in UC San Diego. I went there in the fall of 2011, and at the time I didn't know, but in the previous year, in the winter semester of 2010, there was a very racist party. There was a Facebook invite going out called the Compton Cookout, and so there was a whole bunch of like stereotypical things that ask, fraternities at UC San Diego to come into this party to dress like Black men and Black women in very specific racialized and gendered ways. And so what happened was that students on campus, especially community organizers who have been, trying to bridge across differences racially and culturally, they came together and really created this voice on campus to say, no, we don't want anti-Blackness in our campus, and the UC San Diego needs to be held accountable. And because of that, like years after 2010, there have been a whole bunch of student organizers pushing for UC San Diego to really, make sure that the campus is welcoming not just welcoming to Black students, but also really valuing them. And they really needed to have this conversation specifically about anti-Blackness, because even though people of color, students of color on campus faced their own sets of racialized oppression, there was a very specific type of racism that was targeted against Black folks on campus. And this is the party that really, inspired the movie Dear White People. It inspired the Netflix series Dear White People. And I think it also kind of was like the beginning of a lot of student campus organizing to really have universities address anti-Blackness on campus and also in the communities where the universities are. So I really want to bring that context, because for young people, we are coming to a time where it's like right in our face, especially with the death of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, all these young people who have, had to be killed by the police, and then the subsequent protests that happened in Ferguson and places all over the nation. These are things that young people are seeing like firsthand on social media. And because of that, I think that's why my generation, young millennials, and also Gen Z are so in tune with trying to figure out how do we be in solidarity with other people of color other than, the identity that I belong to. So since leaving to college, because in Stockton, I did not have this, of course, this racial analysis. I know that, we were like the most diverse nation in the city. So when going to college and learning about ethnic studies, learning about student organizing and building cross-racial solidarity, those were the things that really anchored like my work and how I wanted to build community coming back to Stockton. And so I think young people are very much in tune with trying to figure out how to be in solidarity. And especially with the pandemic, a lot of young folks are saying we can't go back to normal because normal is very anti-Black. I mean, pandemic is already exacerbating so much of this systemic inequity. And so I think young people are for sure like, okay, then what are the practical ways that we can show up for Black and Asian and people of color communities?
When you hear anti-Blackness, and this is for anyone, when you hear anti-Blackness, does that term for you only point to the Black community, or is there anti-Blackness within all communities of color?
I think specifically, or how I've kind of come to learn, is that you don't have to be Black to face anti-Blackness. Although it's very targeted towards Black folks, I think anti-Blackness as a logic, as an ideology, just like white supremacy, is present in everyone because it's so conditioned in our society, just like white supremacy is. And so we have to figure out ways to interrogate, like, where does anti-Blackness, not just as in myself internally, how have I internalized anti-Blackness, but how can we interrogate and dismantle the anti-Blackness that's happening across communities interpersonally. And I think that also feeds into this conversation about how do we address anti-Blackness on an institutional level. So I think there's different scales, but I think one that I'm thinking about that is critical for folks to really build the movement is to think about how have we internalized anti-Blackness in ourselves and how do we unlearn that?
Diana, I think that I saw your hand going towards the button. No? Okay. So does anyone else just have any thoughts in regard to anti-Blackness and that question? Elizabeth?
Yeah. I was thinking about, talking about code switching, and I know Yvonne was saying code switching is survival. I think that anti-Blackness is a survival mechanism as well for other people of color in this country trying to either gain power or to stay alive. It could be a whole range in there. And code switching comes at a cost. Anti-Blackness comes at a cost, not just to those who practice it, but to to Black people. And I think that these are things that we can interrogate more as a community of, Asian Americans. maybe not necessarily at the same time that we are processing grief and anger.
Mhm.
That's another conversation, but I do agree that it's layered in there, and it's a survival skill, and it's dehumanizing and causes violence, and I'm not here for it, but it's real.
Mm.
I wanted to respond to that too, because I'm also thinking about when it comes to code switching and using code switching as survival. I also think about how the model minority is really just like how to code switch into like a whole different person or into an American person, so that we're not seen as
Mm.
perpetual foreigners or always not belonging here in the United States. And in bringing up model minority, this history of the term being used in the 1960s against East Asians and kind of like constructing this idea that Asian Americans are good at math or are good at like all these, high-tech jobs, and they're like highly skilled, professional. That idea of the model minority is supposed to juxtapose this idea of a problem minority, that being Black and Latino criminalized folks. So that's something that I've learned in my ethnic studies program, is that
Mhm.
the model minority can only exist with the other side of the problem minority, which is the Black or the Latino figure.
If you don't mind me asking, what is either you or Sandra, what does that term mean, model minority? I've heard it, but I've never even stopped to pay attention to what it means.
Um, Donald, you're the ethnic studies major. Do you want to take it? Do you? Or
I shared earlier that some of the ideas that are attached to model minority is that Asian students or Asians in general are good at math. They're more likely to succeed academically. These are all ideas to kind of juxtapose the idea that Black students are too much to handle, or they can't learn academically. They won't progress academically. So the model minority myth is just that. It's a myth to kind of construct Asian Americans as something that is in
Mm.
really close proximity to white folks,
Okay.
especially East Asians, because they are, light skinned, or more light skinned than other Asians, like Southeast Asians and South Asians. And so there is that idea of a model minority myth being closely tied to, your proximity to whiteness and your distance from Blackness.
Diane?
So one of the ways Asian Americans have internalized that crap is either to try to perpetuate it, which is just damaging, but also I worked with a lot of folks who didn't fit that stereotype. They were poor, they were immigrant. Many of them were starting to become gang members. Many of them were getting high, using drugs, committing crimes because they weren't getting straight A's in school. They didn't conform to that. And so that's why ADAP was founded, Yellow Brotherhood, Asian Hardcore, Asian Joint Communications, because ain't nobody one thing. Ain't nobody, you feel me? Like not everybody can fit into some sort of, some constructed criteria of what is what and who is who. So the pain of trying to live up to that, the pain of trying to live up to that resulted in many Asians going the other way and rebelling against that. And also speaking their truth, that they weren't able to fulfill that. I didn't, right? I got a D in algebra. I used to jump the fence and go get high and, ran around the streets and all that. So I don't know. It's dangerous, it's damaging, but sadly I see it being perpetuated now with shows like Crazy Rich. The title of Crazy Rich Asians gets on my last nerve. Not the film. Let me just clarify it. Once you watch the film, it's like cool. But if you're just scrolling through the Netflix, or if you're going to the theater to see the marquee and you see that, it's registering in the subconscious. If you see bullshit names like Bling Empire and the imagery of that, it's reinforcing stereotypes that we are somehow only driven by financial gain, which is inaccurate also. And I do believe that it's dividing us between our Black and brown communities, because I have heard some of our Black brothers and say, we're going to get some of that rich, Asian money today. And I do think that it is continuing to pit us against each other and perpetuate false narratives, which is why I was co-sponsor of a bill that disaggregated data, because Hmong peoples are struggling with poverty, Laotian people are struggling, Cambodian. So when you disaggregate, we are the most economically diverse population in California. So don't be lumping us together. We're not a monolith. We have distinct immigration narratives. We have struggled with violence, the Chinese massacre in LA. We've struggled with incarceration, all my people during World War II. So, okay, and my final rant is K through 12 education perpetuates the Eurocentric view of American history. And my fantasy is that we can have not ethnic studies as an adjunct thing that you can, choose to take in college, but that it is integrated into American history, K through 12. That little second grader has to learn about it all the way up to the 12th grader in their social studies class. And also, and my final rant is, it would be awesome if in educational settings and school districts, you could learn about the history of your classmates. Where did this Armenian boy come from?
Yeah.
Boy come from? Where does Samoan come from? And to learn about local history too, and to stop paying for the major publishing companies that are based out of fucking Texas, and even one of them, Peterson Publication, comes out of the United Kingdom. Come on now. So I have a problem with what we're being educated with, what we're internalizing, and what we're perpetuating. And I got to go to the restroom. I'll be right back.
Yes, she does. If y'all ain't hung out with Diane, I promise you, she ain't no joke. She is some fire.
She is great. I wanted to she hit on the issue of, it's not just Asian American Pacific Islander. You can't just all lump it all together and say that, gee, that segment is doing well. She hit on it, especially Southeast Asian, that demographic, that they're at the average, they're near the poverty line, and some of them below, some of those groups below the poverty line. So you can't just say, and I get her point to, crazy rich Asians, that is a stereotype and harmful. So the term model minority, I'm going to bring this up a little bit. So it was first coined in 1966 by a sociologist who was writing an article in the New York Times Magazine, I think. And the title of it was Success Story, Japanese American Style. Okay. And this William Peterson was a sociologist, and he wrote about how the family structure and the cultural emphasis on hard work, etc., had helped the Japanese Americans overcome discrimination in their group and become successful, right? So then this term was picked up, to then not just the Japanese Americans, just generally Asian Americans. And so that's where the model minority and people started running with that. But it was fundamentally, as Donald said, to have a model minority, you have to have an opposition, right?
Right.
So that was the wedge put in, like, look, all you immigrants that aren't doing well by white standards, the white. So look at this. What we're pointing to, this model minority. Why can't you be more like them? All you need to do is work harder. All you need to do is, right, down the
Right.
line, down the line. So that has definitely put a wedge between Asian Americans and yes, our Latino brothers, our Black brothers, our all that. So and it is a myth, absolutely. It
Oh
is
my
an
God.
absolute. It is
I-
but there are Asian Americans who really I mean that's how that's how I grew up. Like work hard, study hard, do your best, and you can be a success, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, my friends are indigenous people as well. Yes, absolutely. All so that wedges. So that's how I grew up. Like just work
Mhm.
hard, do your best, and you can be successful here. And it doesn't acknowledge the barriers and the biases and the bigotry and the racism um, that that is going on in our country. And the closer you're imbibing that model minority, myth, and the closer you are to that, the closer you are to that, that's a white supremacist um, point of view. Um, so I guess that, yeah, I'll stop there.
Can I comment on that really fast? I promise.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. This is a conversation.
It pitted us against each other too. And I'm ashamed, but as a third generation Japanese American, I didn't want to be associated with FOB, fresh off the boat immigrants. They had an accent, they didn't dress right, they ate some food that I wasn't wanting them to eat in front of me in school because I was all about trying to assimilate. Now I want to acculturate, but I'm not trying to be white, right? But I thought that I had to because Barbie doll, because all of the images in the magazines were blonde hair, blue-eyed, ectomorphic body types, bone structure, Eurocentric, all of the stuff that made me feel like I had to conform to that. So rather than being united with my immigrant brothers and sisters and Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders with more melanin and darker skin and kinkier hair and different body types, we have this totem pole. Sorry, I just got to name it. That is directly related to skin, hair, and body.
Mhm.
It's unspoken,
Mm.
but it's for real. And it plays out in, okay, you can be friends with so-and-so, but who can you marry? Who can you home? Ooh,
Wow.
Sound familiar? Can I add what I just wanted to add one thing to the formula, the model minority formula, and that's keep your head down, don't speak up, don't talk about politics. And I wonder who does this benefit when we don't talk about, race and politics? We don't get engaged with what's happening. And a lot of it is because of where our parents, grandparents came from, the stories, like my father was fleeing a political situation where the Chinese were being scapegoated. They were an ethnic minority, but they also possessed a lot of power. It's very complicated. So yeah, for safety, he left. He was forced to leave by his parents, actually. And there's trauma and there's fear and there's we just have to see our children grow up and live, and at whatever cost. And so that's a price that we've paid. And then so the cost is to ourselves, and the cost is to the majority of the people in this country who are suffering under this capitalist, white supremacist. You know where I'm going with this. So I wanted to add that to the model minority formula for success in America.
Yeah, this is deep, for sure. And yes, it is similar. And all I keep thinking is, this has been the model, the history when it comes to white supremacy, and so a system that is based on a country, a nation that is based on the root, the foundation of white supremacy, race. And the categories of race, the fact that, okay, so can I tell you how confused I'm and I promise you, I'm so grateful that I get to talk to y'all. Can I tell you how ignorant and confused I am about API? API, okay, Asian, Southeast Asia, other. Who in the heck is the other? And wait, so when you said you're Filipino, and then I heard someone say Chinese, and Asian, and oh God, Sandra, forgive me. You were saying where your family originated from. When I tell you I'm confused, I am confused. And why am I confused? If there was ethnic studies, if there were history, if there was a way for us to know one another, I wouldn't be so darn confused. And I wouldn't be afraid to ask because I'm so scared I'm going to offend. What is made up of API community? Who is experiencing this increase? No, for real. Like, can I just ask that? I'm gonna start there. I got another question I want to ask, but that's gonna create tension with my Black folks in the community, which I'm good for. Because because I just am, Elizabeth, I don't care. But so at this point, first, the confusion is who makes up the API and why are you guys are Pacific Islanders Asian? If not, why are they in this other category with what's going on here?
So, like, not to oversimplify, but not to oversimplify or generalize, but for the purpose of this conversation, and really welcome everyone to chime in for real. East Asian, so right from East Asia, China, Japan, Korea, etc. Southeast Asia, right? Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, etc. Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders from the Pacific Islands. South Asian, right? Indian, Pakistani. So our history of immigration is such where we got here first. East Asians kind of got here first. And then you could see the migration patterns vary and also the generational differences. And there again, the skin color differences. And also we have intra-ethnic and intra-country and we've had war. So Samoa and Tonga, China and Japan and Korea. Oh, it's deep. Like I dated a Korean brother for a minute, and his parents were Japanese and Korean, but their parents were not having that because they had war between them. So like it's deep. So one of the questions one would have to ask is, what generation are you? What's your immigration history? And were there intra-ethnic conflicts from your homeland? And then also language, right? Over 100 dialects of Asian languages, over 47 distinct ethnic groups in California alone.
Wow. Okay.
We speak each other's languages. So when we're trying to get government dollars and resources for in-language translation, you can't just have like, it is English, Spanish, and then like, there ain't no Asian language. So you have to go with threshold languages in the district or whatever neighborhood you're in, because translating it into Thai is going to help a Korean. Translating it into Khmer, which is the Cambodian language, ain't going to help the Japanese. So it's deep, it's intense. That could be like a whole 3-day conference.
Wow. Sandra, I seen you pop up.
Oh, really quite quick though. That's why we something called the Disaggregated Data Bill, Assembly Bill 1088, because when we're looking at data in aggregate, we come out okay in terms of household income, in terms of educational attainment. Generally, we come out okay in aggregate. But once you start to disaggregate and you look at specific health patterns, disease patterns, education patterns, ooh, it's complex.
Oh man.
And at some point later, not now because I don't want to hog up the conversation, but can we spend a little bit talking about the church? I need to.
Oh God, yes.
Okay.
Oh yes. You ain't said nothing but a word. Sandra?
No, I was just gonna chime in with agreement with what Diane said. Diane, thank you so much for all your wealth of knowledge. Um, but yeah, it's the lumping of it. All look same, right? All look same. People can't tell the difference between, the Chinese, Filipino, Cambodian, Hmong. They can't tell the difference. And so it's all together in that. And Diane's absolutely right. There is, even within, intra Asian American Pacific Islander, there is some biases and tensions and prejudices going on. Like Japan, you know um occupied Korea and was very harsh with Korea, and China as well. So yeah, my aunt's, when she spoke of growing up in Korea, she would shake telling the stories of their libraries being burnt down, their books being burned, that they weren't allowed to speak Korean in schools. They were, they had to speak Japanese. So there is that, and there is that tension, from that generation.
Did they know Japanese?
Pardon? They were growing up. My great aunts, growing up in the time of the Japanese occupation, and going to schools where they were mandated to speak Japanese and weren't allowed to read their own books, and their books and their temples and their libraries were burnt. So, and if anybody spoke up and spoke out, it was very harsh. In fact, the one thing I didn't mention is that my grandfather, when he came over, part of the reason he came was because he was more outspoken about Korean independence, and at some point decided that it was better for him and his safety to depart. So anyway, so it's not just one monolith, like Asian American Pacific Islander, even. It's not just one grouping. So many different things going on there. So many things. I just want to,
So
What I would
really quick.
go ahead, Diane.
For different purposes, we have to use different types of language. So for political purposes, often when we're doing advocacy, we're API because we're stronger in numbers. But for regional considerations, sometimes we have to be either distinctly Hmong farmers in Fresno. Sometimes we have to be Asian American, as we are now. Sometimes we have to be Asian Pacific Island. So depending on the context, we have to adjust the language.
Wow. So there is a lot of fluidity with the code switching and the adjusting, which is, well, I was going to ask a question and then it lost me because there's so much. So there is so much to this. There is just so much to this. Okay, let's go ahead and go there. The church. Diane? Elizabeth? Okay, I want to start. Let me go ahead and start with my bosom buddy. Elizabeth, I want to ask you if you can describe what made you feel invisible when it came to your religion or church or Christian experience, or I don't know, or if you just want to touch on it just a little bit, like where do you show up and exist in the church? Do you have to assimilate? Are you losing, is there a sense of self? Are you, I
don't know. I feel pretty spiritually ungrounded and homeless these days. Which is really sad for me because I know that there's a community out there that it's here, right? And it's out there we just need to find each other and connect. But like, I think back to Jesus, and when everything coalesced for me with my junior year in college, you had like a leadership retreat with the Christian fellowship I was in, and my staff worker, Jess De La Hencia, I don't know if you will ever watch this, amazing Filipino Christian person, just was like, hey, it's not just about how we relate. It's not just this, which is like a very white Christian thing. Like, it's about God and me. No, it's also about this social plane. And it was like a light bulb went off, and I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Like, that's the whole idea. Like, there's more than just like me praying by myself, that actually it matters. All of this matters. And this is just as important to the divine as this. And so ever since then, combined with my ethnic identity formation that I was carrying, building in college and moving forward in life, growing up in the 2000s and beyond. But that piece, that nugget is still there. In Stockton, I haven't found a community yet where I'm like, I can be this person who loves this Jesus, who saw this social plane as being just as important as this vertical plane. I don't know if this is making sense. Anyways, all this is to say is that I know that that's actually probably the seed, the seed of the root of the core of the very radical starting point is Jesus. And I keep trying to get back to that and to him. And I haven't been able to find my way just yet. But having conversations like this and making connections with people and learning and growing and making mistakes and learning how to take up space, and learning to embrace all of my identities, it's bringing me back to that somehow. I don't have a very articulate way of explaining that, because I'm still in that in-between place in that journey.
I have a question before, because Diane, I know I can see you taking notes too. I already know she's finna go ham. And so I have a question though. Do you at any point feel like you have had to lose your sense of identity in order to be accepted into the Christian? I'm doing this way because to be accepted into the Christian tradition or the Western civilization, practice of religion. Did you have to, or is there another stripping away of you, who you are culturally? We don't know who you are culturally here. So I don't know, Sandra, who you are culturally, and your experience with divine, your experience, with God, who created all in his image and likeness, which means he created Diane, Sandra, Donald, Elizabeth. I know, and I'm a spiritual, kind of homeless, wandering orphan right now in the moment too, because I'm trying to understand if God created all of us in his image and likeness. But then we come into this country that has been stolen from the people that it actually belonged to, and then taken over, and said, okay, and now in order for you to be American, you need to be white, or as white as possible, in your thinking, your speaking, your mannerism, your approach. You need to be Christian, or Christian as possible, because, Jesus is white, and a man. So I just, I hate to go there, but I'm gonna go there. So I feel lost. At some point, I felt angry as a Black woman that I was baptized into the submission of a white supremacist God, that I have found the way that I'm conditioned to do it is just through blind obedience and submission to a thing with the loss of me and my thought or what have you. So anyway, I'm finding my own journey back to my first love. However, you have root. So has there been a loss of your heritage, your culture when it comes to expression of religion and in relationship with divine, with God, and that's for any of you before Diane goes ham.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to hit all your question, Tony, but yeah, but as you know, I am a person of faith. I consider myself a follower of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And the last several years, it has been disappointing. I have been very disappointed in the white evangelical church. Very disappointed. And it has to do with holding on so tightly to that power and to their own comfort and all of that. And what has become is Christian nationalism. It's not Jesus. And so I will hold fast to Jesus, and I will defend Jesus, and I will stand up for that. But these other things, individualism, that's not Christianity, and people are leaving the church because they see the hypocrisy of it. They see that there's not an extension and a consideration towards this plane that Elizabeth was talking about, that in actuality, our faith is something that is not a silo that goes this way, but our faith is worked out in community. It is intended to be worked out in community, right? So when I turn a blind eye, when I close my eyes to that brother or sister and what they're experiencing, and I close my eyes to that and that is not how I'm supposed to be living out my journey, my faith journey. And so it's been heartbreaking. I think I attended this. Well, so there's a book that recently came out that I'm just I'm getting my way through. I have a pile of books of my to read books, but it's called Brown Church by Robert Chow Romero, and it's specifically Diane, yeah, Robert's great. It specifically hits on this. He wrote it because there were these Latino kids that would grow up in the Latino church, right? And they would get and they'd get to college, and then they'd start asking, then people would say like, no, that's the white man's religion. What are you doing with the white man's religion? It's like, no, but my abuela says, this. And so, and the dissonance between that, it was too much to bear. And so then they end up throwing up their hands and leaving the church. But he I haven't gotten through all the way through the book, but his premise, it really is that there is a meshing of that the Brown Church is this collective, is this, this, that let's not just be, it is not about only this, that it is about social justice, that is biblical justice, and that you can't be following Jesus. He was a radical. He was a radical. He was in his time, a radical, he was a freak, he was subversive, he was right, all of these things. We forget that. We forget that in our complacency, and we forget that in our status quo, that he reached out and to the Samaritan woman at the well. Crazy, totally crazy. His disciples said, "What are you doing talking to her?" Not because she was a woman, well, there was that, but because she's a Samaritan. No, we don't. We're Jewish people. We don't talk to them. We don't associate,
Right.
So, I mean, there's all of this. It's not, it's, the Bible is not in, it is not in some kind of vacuum away from any. There was a lot of ethnic stuff going on, right? There was a lot going on. So anyways, I'm going on now, but yeah. I don't know, and I don't think I answered your question.
No, you did.
Okay.
And I throw stuff out there that is broad to just dive into intentionally. Yes.
And okay, and so the denomination I belong to is the ECC, the Evangelical Covenant Church, and I wish for myself, I'm wondering if we could just lose the evangelical, because it really has become something else. But anyways, I'm part of the ECC, and I am proud of the things that our denomination has faced in terms of racial reconciliation, and some of the voices of people that have come out of the ECC, including Dominic Gilliard and Soon Chang Ra, David Swanson, who are speaking out about these issues, and they're not hiding. They're not turning a blind eye. Are they doing it perfectly? No, nobody's doing it perfectly, but they're trying, and they're engaging, they're listening, they are including, they're including the voices at the table. They are inviting them to be in places and positions of leadership. The marginalized voices, they're doing that. Again, not perfectly, but they're doing it. So anyway, so I feel a lot of hope in my denomination. But yes, I have talked to many people who have felt despair at their own situations with their churches, and etc. So
Anyone else, Diane? I know that you.
Donald, do you want to? I don't want to Okay. So yes, I echo everything Sandra and Sister Tony have said. My old church, and I'm going to name them, Gardena Valley Baptist Church, which was a historically Japanese American church. The last two senior pastors over the last 30 decades has been a white man. That says a lot. When your historically Japanese American church has two senior pastors, what does that tell you about what's been internalized? So that all the associate pastors if you look at our website and you see the white 52-year-old male khaki wearing, and I'm sorry, I'm all judgy because I'm angry. And I think candidly, what Tony and Sandra have pointed out is heresy, because Jesus was not only walking with the marginalized, he was marginalized, and he was hung on a cross by a corrupt government. Sound familiar? So we internalized that so much so that a white missionary came to our church and used this as an illustration of wanting to be Chinese when she was a child, because her best friend who went to our church was Chinese. She used the slanty eyes, and it was so sickening. Our church laughed. The Asian congregants laughed with her, and I couldn't help but to cry. Here's another example, and I've got like 27, but I'll only give you 2 or 3. when George Zimmerman verdict came out, acquitting after he killed Trayvon Martin, that Sunday I wore a hoodie. I got Skittles and I brought them, and I was trying to pass them out, and no one got the reference. No one knew what I was wearing a hoodie for. No one understood why I was carrying Skittles, and I started to weep. And one homie who's a progressive Asian Christian, Paul Matsushima, shouts to Paul. He went out to his car, he got his hoodie, and he sat with me in solidarity. 2 of us out of a congregation of 500 understood what the hoodie and Skittles meant. Another example, besides the slanty-eyed one with people laughing, I asked, hey, can the neighborhood ministry show the documentary 13th? Because our Black brothers and sisters are getting laid out all day, every day, and they're getting arrested in ways that are just unethical because the prison industrial complex is profiting off their Black bodies. Can we watch that documentary? And you know what they said? The leadership said, after they screened it, just to be safe. No, we think that it will be divisive because it's one-sided, and we need to hear both sides of the story, both sides of the argument. And I said, well, I had to calm myself down. We've been inundated all day, every day with the predominant narrative. This is a 90-minute documentary that's going to inform us in ways that will make us question what we've been inundated with by the media, by K-12 education, by you, the church. And my final example is when Trump was elected, my stomach, my body was just writhing. I would go to church, I wouldn't even sit down, and I was a pastor there. I couldn't even sit. I would stand in the back with my arms folded, listening to the sermons to see how they were going to preach, and you couldn't even tell what year it was. Like, these mofos just acted like ain't no thing. And then, so I sat down with the senior pastor and associate pastor, bless their hearts, and I asked, how many of our church do you think voted for Trump? And they said about over half. So I replied, well, then you failed, because every Sunday you have a captive audience. Every Tuesday we have Bible study. Every Friday we have youth group. And our church still voted for Trump. What are they learning? What kind of doctrine are we preaching and teaching so that our church is voting according to their values? I graduated from Fuller Theological Seminary, and this is the predominant narrative. Even though Fuller tries, if you look at their website and their magazine, they got all the right colors, but the predominant narrative is still white evangelical Christian Presbyterianism or something like that. So yes, I think that it's dangerous. And I think we also idol worship American middle classism. So there's this checklist. Woo! Heterosexual marriages, 2 children, 1 dog, drive a Lexus or some kind of nice Japanese car, 2-car garage. You go 1 vacation in Hawaii, 1 vacation in Tahoe. And
Hello, Diane.
And you marry people like that. And I also joined this LGBTQ support group, and we were trying to reteach and have the pastoral staff understand that was then and this is now. And the Apostle Paul wrote occasional letters for an occasion. That wasn't gospel. There are 3 Old Testament verses and 3 New Testament verses that talk about homosexuality, which, by the way, was not put into the Bible until 1946. So why don't we step back and ask ourselves, where did we learn that? And why does it matter if the Bible has 3,000 verses around poverty and 6 around sin?
Oh my God. So, stop right there. Don't say another word. Wait.
I'm going to stop.
Can you right there. Pastor Diane, please?
Stop right there. If it has how many verses in the Bible on poverty?
3,000. 2,000 to 3,000 and 6. Old Testament. So Levitical law, you can't eat shrimp. You can't mix fibers. Oh, and you can't have same sex. Like, okay, so I eat shrimp. You can't eat bottom feeding fish. You can't mix fibers. Just all kind of Levitical law. And then the 3 New Testament verses, again, if you look at the original language, Greek and Hebrew. So Hebrew for Old Testament, Greek for New Testament. Ain't nothing about homosexuality. That was put in 1946 through an Oxford publishing company. And one would have to ask, why was that word inserted in 1946? I don't know. I have a lot of questions. And also, if you don't know, then don't act like you know. Just say, we don't know. We weren't there. We didn't write this shit at that time. So why don't we just lean into love? Why don't we just lean into where Jesus was and move on? Shit.
Diane, can you wait? I just want to make sure, because I want people to understand. I'm not talking to somebody that didn't graduate from where?
I have a Master of Divinity from Fuller Theological Seminary.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, just in case the people from Fuller that are hearing what you're saying, question or challenge, by, this heresy that you might be speaking. I want to make sure that they know that you went to the same Fuller they did in order to get the same Masters in Divinity that they received. And so, yeah, girl. Oh man. Okay. Ooh, that right there, the fact that we are ignoring all of those scriptures on poverty and focus on the fact that our whole last presidential election and campaign, that it was driven by two things that had to do with pro-choice and homosexuality, and that everything about poverty is being overlooked and excluded. That to me blows my freaking mind when you said that. Come, park it right there. Let me stop for it. All right. Anybody else? We all off mute. Donald, you ain't said nothing. Go ahead, speak.
Well, I'm actually, not a part of any church, so I think I'd rather just give back the time for everyone else.
Well,
but I really appreciate everyone's insight.
Donald, though, what would your comfort level be walking into a mainline American Christian church? Just real talk.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
See?
Yeah.
See?
Why, Donald? If you don't mind me asking it, and if you're not comfortable, just even sharing why. But I would love to know what.
Yeah. Well, my family background is Catholic raised, so there's a lot of similarities to Christianity. But I know from my experience growing up as a queer, non-binary person, it just was not conducive for me. It was harmful in a lot of ways. And I know that's not the fault of like the actual religion. I think it has to do with practice and the people in positions of power. But there's still a lot of healing for me when it comes to religion. So that's why I'm so willing to have y'all kind of speak on that.
And I also wanted.
This is why people are leaving. They're finding their spiritual growth flourishes when they leave the confines of the church, that their relationship to community, protesting is worship. You offer your body as a living sacrifice. You belong to each other. This right now, Tony, what you're doing, this is worship, in my view.
Yeah. Yeah. Girl, you just hit my heart. I remember having a belong circle, and I had a belong circle with many. It was diverse women of color, and it is where I built my greatest relationship. And there was such healing that was taking place in that space. And I remember, feeling that it was in all earnestness the truest sense of what it was that I was purposed and called to do in that moment. And there are times when I would show up, on panels in different spaces, and I would just hear, in the spirit, God, have me share and lift up, the injustice that was taking place, and so the privilege to be able to sit in a space, the privilege to be able to sit in a space and give voice to individuals that are marginalized because you're more comfortable hearing my voice than seeing their face. And so that's the humility, the honor, though, to be selected, of God to go into spaces. Um, I feel more, I have no words, more, I feel more purpose. Um, I feel more called of God. I feel more sitting next to a dying man, listening to a dying man who was homeless, advocating for him so that he did not die in his car in the dead of cold, and being able to sit on his next to his bed and give a prayer and rites of passage to his body and grieve. And I have felt more used of God in that, and getting to know Donald. And even if I need to unlearn my conditioned mindset of what plurals pronouns are to me, acknowledging his personal pronouns as they and them is not going to defile my she, her, hers. Mm.
I think that the scarcity framework of viewing everything is I've just been thinking about that, and if I can pull it back to the conversation, how do we hold all the people we bring with us in this conversation about anti-Asian violence and being in relationship with the Black community? All of us here, are, love and support and are working towards Black liberation in the ways that we are able to, but how do we hold that? We know that we can, but how are we holding that with the images we're getting from the media, the things that we know that are happening? How do we, Diane's story about her father, how do we hold all of this together?
I think there's an appetite for spaces to share sorrow, to lament together. So we need spaces that are for our people and also shared spaces like this. And I'm hoping that maybe from this we can grow out, break bread, well, socially distanced, and just be in relationship, lament, and celebrate too. Yeah, I do want to share very quickly, if I may, or I can wait, Tony, till you're ready. But just a few pieces of history that are worth celebrating, because the narrative right now in social media is very divisive, and there's a lot of anti-Black narrative going on the Asian feeds, and there's a lot of anti-Asian narrative going on the Black feeds, because I'm in both. My godson is Black, and I'm part of the ceasefire board, so I'm blessed and privileged to look at both, and we have to offset that narrative with these kinds of moments, as well as knowing our shared history. So when you're ready, Tony, just a few stories not stories, but I have a list of moments when we've been in solidarity.
I have to pull them. I have to pull them into my chat space, Diane. So if you can just give me a minute to grab them and do that, that would be great.
Yeah, and if it doesn't work technically, it's okay.
And if you want, Donald, were you going to say something?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to respond to Elizabeth bringing it back to building solidarity between Asian and Black communities. One thing that I really wanted to emphasize was being careful and, trying to avoid performative allyship. When I see Elizabeth and you, Pastor Tony, talk about each other's friendship. Like, to me, that is something that is not transactional, which I think happens a lot when it comes to solidarity building. More than, or not more than, instead of transactional solidarity, we need to have a relational type of solidarity. Relational being that we need to build deep relationships with one another. So I know, like, Diane, you had shared that you have a Black son. I think we all have like Black family members, Black friends, Black neighbors. And those are the types of relationships that hold kind of the puzzle piece, the foundations to building Black and Asian solidarity. It doesn't have to be at a protest. It doesn't have to be at city council. It can start in the home. It can start in your friendships. How you show up for your Black community, your Black friends, your Black family. Yeah, I think so I just want to go back to like cautioning about performative allyship. For me, that's something that I had to learn over a lot of years. I think I'm still trying to interrogate if my allyship or solidarity building is performative. And I think the only folks who can tell me if it's not is Black folks. I just wanted to kind of bring that point home. So like also thinking about collective organizing, grassroots organizing. Those are the spaces that have really given me life and meaningful relationships to build this movement between Black and Asian folks. So I just wanted to give that some light.
Hey, Tony, don't stress too hard on these images. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm having difficulty pulling them in. But can you just share some of the things that you wanted to?
I'll do it really fast. I always do that, but then I take too long. Okay. After World War II, Japanese Americans were welcomed into the Crenshaw district, and there were friendships built at the bakery, at Holiday Bowl, at the coffee shops, at the rib joint, just hanging out, going to Dorsey High School. During the Vietnam War, we had solidarity. And see, this is all pre-social media, so there wasn't as much posturing and posing real talk. Like if you're having to organize a rally, you're in someone's living room making the flyers, making the banners. It was laborious. So there was a unifying voice around the anti-war efforts during Vietnam. Asians were there during Selma and marched together. The Third World Liberation movement included a storefront on Jefferson Boulevard and Crenshaw, where they had kind of like the Black Panther model of tutoring and food and hanging out and teach-ins and book signings and whatnot. Mike Morassey, a Japanese-American lawyer, was the field director for APIs for Jesse Jackson, who ran for president in '84 and '88. Mike Morassey then became the field deputy for Congresswoman Maxine Waters, Yellow Peril and Black Panthers, Free Huey Newton, Yuri Kochiyama with Malcolm X in Harlem doing prisoner advocacy and with the Nation of Islam. Nothing performative there because everybody hung out in her Harlem apartment. Grace Lee Boggs and James Boggs doing Detroit civil rights and Black power work, and they were married. Vincent Chin, Black leadership came out when Vincent Chin was laid out, and all of those white, the white men that killed Vincent Chin with the baseball bat were also acquitted, like Rodney King. We see now APIs for Black lives, and this is where I wonder about the performative stuff. No judgment, though. During the '92 riots, we had neighbor-to-neighbor dialogue groups between Blacks and Asians to try to work out some of the festering tensions in South Central. And today, Japanese and other Asian Americans are in full support of HR 40, the African American Redress Movement. But see, these things are not taught in your 10th grade history class, are they? You don't see this narrative in Instagram and Twitter and I don't know all what the fuck everyone is doing, but all that shit, right? Like so this is why I want us to do more of this and produce little videos and have more images of us together. Well, and as for us Christians, there's a season, and we've had a season of really coming around Black lives, and now we need our Black brothers and sisters, real talk, to come along. So thank you, Sister Tony.
Yeah. I'm loving that for real. That's what I heard in the spirit when I would, after I finished talking to Elizabeth, was siblings in solidarity. That we're brothers and sisters, and I was gonna put brothers and sisters, but I needed to change that, and now I get it. It's not just because of the brothers and sisters, but it's also my queer brothers and sisters, those that are, so it's siblings, that we're related, that we're all standing in solidarity together. That is the only way that we are going to come against and dismantle racism and supremacy, is if we do this together, and stop allowing the system to pit us against one another. We have got to combat that. We have got to be self-aware enough to know I'm being pitted. I am operating in ignorance. This is not my enemy. You are not my ally. I mean, you're not my enemy. You are not my, so we have to come from that mindset. In wrapping up, Sandra, I'm going to share the Stop API Hate. I think that there is a clip that we had that had some real concrete steps. I don't think it is. Let me go to the private chat. There's a link. Can you tell me what that is so I can bring it up?
It's actually an article that is from my denomination. But at the very end of it, I was very impressed. I mean, the article's good, but I was very impressed with, here, I'll put in the private chat again.
I'm going to share it on the screen too.
Okay. I was really impressed with the resources towards the bottom, because when things like this, when this happens, all of us are left wondering, like, what can I do? What can I do? How can I make a difference? What can I do? And there's some, concrete things that towards the very end of the article, there's some videos to watch, but some of the things that they recommend is, and I wholeheartedly agree with, is, start learning your history and read books, watch YouTube videos or documentaries about Asians in America. There's specifically a PBS documentary series that came out, was it the fall? I forget exactly. About Asian, it was Asian Americans, Asians in America, a PBS documentary series that was excellent, that kind of hit on a lot of the history. Be present with your Asian American friends and Asian American Pacific Islander friends. Ask them, check in with them and say, how are you doing? How are you doing with this? Just in the same way that I try to check in with my friends of color when things are happening in their communities and with their people groups. How are you doing with that? How what's going on? How are you doing? And certainly signing petitions that are out there to stop Asian American Pacific Islander hate. So those are just concrete things that individuals can do, that are easy to do. They, again, like Donald was saying, you don't always have to go out to a protest rally and march and et cetera. Educate yourself. I'm trying to educate myself about my Black and brown siblings, and that's all we ask, is just educate yourself. And yeah, we can stand instead of othering each other, and that I heard something yesterday or a couple days ago about instead of going from other to brother, that's what we need to do. We are all in this together. So, and we need allies. We need allies that will stand in true solidarity with us. So,
Donald, I'm going to drop some things in there, but I seen you drop something also. Are you able to hear me, Donald?
Yes, I can. Did you want me to share those?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Okay. So some of these things Diane had passionately shared with but I wanted to just write it out here in case anyone on the group chat wants to, Google it themselves and research. What Sandra had just said, you don't have to go out into these large events. You can do that internal work to unlearn anti-Blackness and be in solidarity. So some examples that I listed here is the Third World Liberation Front that happened in San Francisco State University, which was really the spark that birthed ethnic studies here in California. And then there's Yuri Kochiyama, who is in almost a close partner to Malcolm X, Grace Lee Boggs. Yellow Peril supports Black Power, and Black Panther Party against the international hotel evictions. So these are very prominent historical examples of Black and Asian American communities, mostly here in California in the Bay Area, actually. So this is Black and Asian solidarity, I think, is our legacy here in Stockton and in the Bay Area. This is something that we should continue and keep this history alive so that we can keep learning how to be in solidarity. So thank you, Diane, for sharing a lot of those.
So I'm also going to put a bit link in the chat, and it's a survey. Donald, can you tell us about this survey, please?
Yeah, so I saw some folks here in this panel join the Thursday event this week called the 209 Against Anti-Asian Sentiment, which was led by the 209 Asian and Pacific Islander Coalition. And so that's a coalition that started here in Stockton to really pull API individuals and organizations to basically movement build here. So our committees include health, racial justice, and movement building. And so we created this survey tool that Pastor Tony is going to link. And this tool is something akin to the Stop AAPI Hate survey, but it's more place-based. So it's specifically for folks who live in Stockton and the San Joaquin County and 209 region. So we really want to build our data collection here, especially disaggregated data, as we had spoken earlier about today, to see where the specific need is. Because we do have a very, very diverse population of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders here in Stockton. And so it's kind of wild because Stockton has such a rich Asian American and Pacific Islander history. So if anyone wants to learn more about that, there's so much online, and there's so many community folks who are trying to preserve that history and teach it too. So going back to the tool, it's to help collect data on API incidents here.
And so Assemblymember Phil Ting has successfully secured 1.5 million to research that data so that we can understand it. So it's one level to collect it, and it's another one to analyze it so that you can have very clear strategies to address why and where and who and when.
There is also, if anyone wants to share the Stop AAPI Hate, that's on a state level. Can somebody just touch on that a little bit? And I'm going to drop that link in the chat as well.
I think, Sandra, did you want to share about that?
It was founded, it's actually a nationwide thing.
Oh, okay.
To document anti-Asian incidents. And it was founded by a few folks. I can't remember all their names, but Dr. Russell Jung, who's a excuse me, is a professor at SF State. He was one of them. So, and that is they not just documenting those and having people send those in, but they have other ways to get involved and become active to help stand against anti-Asian sentiment. So stop AAPI hate.org.
Okay. So I've got that in the chat as well. I just wanted to make sure folks have resources or what have you. As we're wrapping up, I see one more video that has been dropped. Is that YouTube video that was in the private chat? And so I can share that as well. And the YouTube video is surrounding something that you've already mentioned.
I'm sorry, are you talking to me, Tony?
Donald, you dropped a YouTube video in the chat.
Oh, did I?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
in the private chat. Did you already put it in the conversation on social media?
Oh, I didn't post the YouTube.
Oh, okay, someone had posted, dropped the YouTube. Oh, you know what? That was me. Okay. All right. So you guys, we are at time. And I want to thank you so super duper much for just coming into this space. And yeah, man, this has been rich. It's not the last conversation that we are going to have. I know that Faith in the Valley will be holding a conversation where we'll be inviting Diane, you definitely back in. And then we'll be reaching out to some of our national faith leaders around clergy formation. And we just want to really lean into what does our faith call us to do in this moment. You know, how should we be moving in this moment? So if there are anyone that is local, Donald, in the Central Valley that want to connect with work centering around this, how can they reach you? How do they connect with you?
So they can look up on Facebook for the 209 Asian and Pacific Islander Coalition, or it could just be 209 API Coalition.
Okay.
And then also we have our information on the org that I'm involved with, which is called Empowering Marginalized Asian Communities, or EMAC. Our Instagram is at EMAC Stockton. So I think we'll post again the survey tools. So just keep circulating that.
Okay. Okay. So I really, really appreciate that so super duper much. And once again, I wanted to thank you all in there. And so I want us right now in this moment, I want you to find your anchor. Picture your anchor. And I want you to imagine that you have a rope or line, but it's a very secure line, and that you grab that line. And as Diane takes us through just a couple of deep breaths, I would love for you to grab a hold to that line and begin to pull and draw yourself back to what you are anchored to. So Diane, if you could lead us through a couple of just deep cleansing breaths as we get back to our root, get back to our anchor.
So our first deep breath is a breath of deep gratitude. So inhale, slow and deep. The second deep breath is to acknowledge your ancestors and all your beloved that you bring into this space. So second, slow, deep breath in. And our third deep breath is to acknowledge that we belong to each other. Third deep breath in. Siblings in solidarity. Great thanks. Ashe.
Ashe. So I appreciate you all tapping in with us in this virtual space. And we will connect with you again soon. God's blessings. Peace.